Hey, Larry.
What?
We're recording this meeting. I wanted to ask, I see that Patricia's here. This is the finance meeting. Is anyone else, or why didn't anyone else from the financial department attend this meeting, or are they planning, or did you invite them?
I didn't invite anybody, it's not my meeting.
Okay, who's in the finance committee? That'd be- Did you guys invite the financial representatives of this district to this meeting? I know, but normally Tina and all those other people attend, correct? Will they be,
Sometimes.
will they be attending today?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Did you specifically invite them to this very critical
I
meeting?
never specifically invited them.
Andy, did you? Russ, did you? Did you see the value of inviting them to your meeting?
They typically come on their own. If they don't, someone will be in their place.
Okay, we'll see if they attend.
I know.
Finance committee meeting. You're on camera. What do you need? I don't think he's a doctor by any means. Superintendent. He'd be superintendent. Yeah, superintendent.
You know, there's a particular way or not.
Out of respect, it would be that.
Please stand for a pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me, Larry, are you presiding over this financial? Who's going to preside over the financial committee meeting?
Whoever the chair of the finance committee is.
Who would that be? Andy? Andy, okay. Are you going to wait until Tina or any of the other people from the finance department arrive, or are we going to proceed without them?
It's past 6 o'clock meeting time, so we will begin.
Were they?
We have roll call, please.
Yeah, were they invited?
Yes.
It's a public meeting.
I understand, but no, were they specifically invited to say, we'd like you here? It would be a benefit to our board or benefit to our finance committee to have them attend.
It's not a mandatory meeting for
I,
that.
I agree, but there's a value to it. There usually are at these meetings. Were they specifically told not to be here?
No,
Okay.
roll call, please.
Andrew Genser,
Present.
Richard Phelps, Rita Spinelli, here. Patricia Denafora, here. Tina Champ, Jonathan Faber.
Any courtesy before roll? I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Denafora.
Excuse me, how would they have done courtesy of the floor if there's no forms?
Can we please go through the finance?
I understand, but he just asked if there's courtesy of the floor, there's no forms.
Right now, we're going through the finance meeting. When we have open discussion, we'll see if there's any discussion.
Did you just say courtesy of the floor?
I did ask courtesy.
Yeah, so shouldn't we just ask the people since there was
But
no
it's-
forms if they have one?
But again, it's not a formal board meeting with an open discussion courtesy of the
He
floor.
run the meeting and he offered it. In fairness, if they had a right, they could have filled one out. If they can't, you should just ask them if they wanted to speak, right?
We could
I think it's a good
Is there
idea.
anyone who'd like to speak as public forum? Okay,
Thank you for providing the courtesy.
We have Georgia's Transportation Daily run bill for approval. It's included with the packet. The total is $133,002.17. We're looking for approval to move that to the board agenda again.
Yes.
Approved.
Yes.
The second item on the agenda is a self-insurance overview. I know at the last board meeting, there was some discussion brought up about our current medical benefit structure and how people pay, how much they pay, and why don't they pay more. I'd just like to say that the medical benefits are what's enacted by the collective bargaining agreements. The collective bargaining agreements are currently in place. It wouldn't be until negotiations that we would be able to adjust the plan design structures. The next item is the 2019-20 budget discussion, and I'd just like to provide an overview of the current budget status. The 2019-20 budget for personnel costs, that would be salaries and benefits, was built based upon the currently in place collectively bargained agreements. The budget includes $30 million for personnel costs, of which $16.6 million is related to salaries, $7 million is due to PSERS and employer taxes, and $6.4 million is due to employee benefits. The remaining 2019-20 budget for non-personnel related costs was built upon the current year-to-date expenditures and most recent 3-year average, 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18. The budget includes $15 million for non-personnel related costs. Included within the $15 million of non-personnel related costs is $1.5 million for mandated charter school costs, $1.73 million in support of CCTI, $234,000 in support of LTRC, $20,000 in support of the Lehighton Memorial Library, $2.6 million in special education costs from the IU and other entities, $3.7 million for bond payments, and $5.13 million for other expenditures, which include supplies, book, technologies, repairs, occupancy costs, and any other costs the district has to incur. So that gives you a broad overview of where the budget stands, what things the district has control over versus those things that we don't have control over. The mandated charter school costs, our collective bargaining agreements are currently actively in place. The budget was built upon all of those items that have been put in place.
Excuse me, just to clarify, you mentioned it was $3.7 million for the bond payments?
Yes, Mr. Bradley.
And then what was the amount for supplies?
5.13 million would be everything else. Supplies, books, technology, fuel, electricity, water, sewage.
And of the $3.7 million in bond payments, how much of that is interest?
Interest is 1.9 million.
Thank you.
Are we still working off of the final proposed numbers, Patty, or have you made adjustments to any of the
There have been some minor adjustments to take out things that I noticed were looked to be one-time expenditures, so backing those out of the averages. But nothing substantial.
And this budget also does include the retirements that we've since received this December.
And with what you had, we just talked about, what is the number then from the fund balance that would be consumed if the budget stays in its current state?
If the budget stays in its current state, we're looking at about a $4 million budget shortfall. Now, there are items that if they trend in a positive direction, if we have less charter school enrollments at other charter schools and have more people enroll in our own charter school, that will save roughly $25,000 a student for special ed, $12,000 roughly for a regular education student. That will have a positive impact on the budget. If our claims cost on healthcare trend in a better direction, that has a positive effect. Right now, over 40% of our claim costs are coming from 36 individuals. So if any one of those individuals greatly improves, that will help our benefit costs as well.
And the benefits are a big portion of this $4 million shortfall, is that correct?
Correct.
And that $4 million shortfall with the benefits, it was a lack of, please explain this lack of recording that Mr. Fike was doing or something?
Throughout the year, throughout this current 18-19 year, the benefit payments that were made to the medical carriers were not indicated in the expenditure of the district. So throughout from July through, I believe it was October, November, December, on all of those board reports, the healthcare costs were not shown. The payments were made to the carriers, because if you don't make the payments, the benefits will be shut off. The payments were made to the carriers, however, it wasn't shown in the expenditures of the district. So within, I believe it was the March statements, you'll see a lump sum adjustment to record what was paid throughout the 18-19 year that as of that point had not been shown in the expenditures.
And when does those expenditures normally get accredited to a budget report?
They would be debited to an expenditure, something within.
Monthly?
Yes.
And whose responsibility inside of your office is to debit the expenditure to the budget?
I was not here when the former business administrator was here. I don't know how he handled that. I believe it was the benefits department that would do that allocation.
So the benefits department would be the accountant in charge of accountant and benefits that reports to Tina Champ. That would be Melanie Windley.
Yes.
Okay, and then Tina, who's the assistant business manager, I'm under the impression she provides the bank reconciliation reports and the board audit work and the monthly treasurer's reports. So, and also the bank account reconciliations. So she would then have had direct access to Melanie's information. And then she reports back to Brian and the buck stops with Brian. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Except for the fact I made a mistake, I'm sorry. The buck really stops with the board overseeing Brian because he's one of our subordinates as a board of directors. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, more correct, I'll say, right? So how was it that this occurrence took place in this short period of time prior to your employment, but never before in the life of Brian's tenure here?
I can't speak to that. I was not here. I can only speak to the fact that when I came here, I was receiving items to approve for payment that were not being coded to an expense account, which I then immediately questioned, and then digging into it further, was told that throughout the year, they were not charged to expense. Checks were issued, but the expenditure was not reflected within the expenditure statements.
So what would if they're coded to an expense account, what would the coded expense account number look like? A series of 15 or 20 digits?
It would.
Okay. And in that series of 15 or 20 digits, if it's listed on the board's financial fund accounting register, you're telling me that it was told to the board that it was applied to those accounts, but it actually wasn't applied?
That's not what I said. The check was listed as a check payment. However, the check was not recorded to an expense account. It was recorded to a balance sheet account. So it was not shown as part of the expenditures that the district was incurring throughout the year. That correction was made, and all of the expenditure incurred from July 1st forward is now appropriately reflected within the 200 object expenditure codes.
And what would the expenditure code be?
There's probably 50 different ones it would be. It would be based upon the function, an 1110, a 2160, 2220, and then it would be under a 271 for medical, 272 for dental, as far as the object.
So let's use Highmark, one of the bigger ones. So Highmark should be accredited to an account code that would have 271 in its code,
It
correct?
should have some form of 200 object code.
Right, so it would be like 10-0462-271, followed by a dozen zeros.
Did you say 10-0462?
Yeah, 10.
0462 is a liability account. That's a balance sheet account. It would have to go to, it should go to an expenditure account, would be a 4-digit from 1,000 to 5999.
So it'd be more like a 10-1241-214. Okay. So of the expenditures and the checks that were written, you're kind of saying, can you explain it to me what you're saying? Maybe treat me like I'm a fifth grader, right? Because I can't pass that. When I watch that show, if I'm smarter than a fifth grader, I lose frequently. So pretend I'm not as smart as a fifth grader. When I see my check register, how are they not recorded to an account expenditure, but a liability? And when are they transferred to an actual account?
They should have been recorded to the expenditure as they occurred. That didn't happen, so it was not reflected in the total expenditures of the district. It is now reflected in the total year-to-date expenditures of the district because it has been corrected, moved from the balance sheet account to expenditures where it should have been to begin with.
So they were left in suspense.
They are currently now sitting in 5800 to 200 object code for suspense to be allocated amongst all the other expenditure functions. Right now it's in a 5800 function. However, you tie them back to whether it's instructional staff, whether it's support staff. School code requires that you follow the chart of accounts, and then it would be allocated back to the individual's primary job function.
So all the checks that were written that were allocated to a liability instead of an expenditure account were still incurred by the district and not seen by the board or the management on any of the reports that you give us. And therefore, that's why that expenditure account is off by $3.4 million?
What I'm telling you is that at the point that I began here in March, the expenditures for your benefits was understated because throughout the year the district made payments, and while the check that was written was on the list of checks given to the board, the expenditure was not recorded in the expense accounts. That's the correction I made.
So it was understated where?
Understated on the budget summary reports that you would receive.
Okay. So in our,
And that's the last page of the enclosures for those, I believe.
Well, the individual accounts would be broken out amongst all the different functions.
So when I look at our condensed 3 budget summary report, I'd be looking at the total expenditures and other expenditures. And then you list on July's of 18, actually that wouldn't be you, that would have been Brian back in July of 18, correct? And he lists other expenditures, $3.7 million. That would have been similar to what you're experiencing now, correct?
I would have to pull out that report and investigate it. I can't speak to that, I wasn't here.
So the district overspent money as a result of insurance, is that correct? Claims?
The district's claims were at a higher level than what the budget was anticipated.
And we self-insure the
Yes.
district, right? So how does Highmark come into play? If we're self-insuring, what does Highmark do?
Highmark is they handle the administrative respect of the claims, meaning they process the claims on our behalf and we pay them a fee for that.
And we have a broker that sets up that per head for Highmark, correct? And that broker was BHA? No, I'm sorry, not BSI, that's the new one. Who was ETA maybe? Was it ETA?
I wasn't here then, I believe it was ETA.
Do you know who it was, Andy?
EPA.
ETA? Okay, great, thank you. So who's in charge of ETA? Who's our contact for ETA?
Again, it would have been a contact through the business office.
All right, but Rita, do you know who the contact is?
I know that Joe Pilla is.
He's ETA? Okay, great.
Mhm.
And then, have you ever talked to Joe?
No.
Have you ever talked to Joe yet? Who else is finance would be, you never talked to Joe? Did anyone talk to Joe about this situation? That our claims are,
In all due respect to Mr. Pilla, he didn't set the budget, the business.
I understand that, but apparently somebody set a budget. That he would be involved in helping us understand what our claims were before and what they anticipated to be. They helped with the consortium to get away from the consortium, so because our claims were so low and our rating was so low, he was instrumental in saving this district. The first year we did that was $500,000, and the second year we saved about $250,000. So his input would be valuable to me as a board member. Would it be valuable to you if you had some of his insight?
I guess my question.
I'm sorry,
I'm
I
sorry.
apologize,
No,
yeah.
it's fine.
I was asking the finance committee who's in charge and responsible for this budget item and the resulting shortfall that occurred over an entire year without discovery until last month.
There are a number of other items beyond benefits.
I respect that, but I'm asking the finance committee, the Rita and Andy and Richard, did they contact Joe when we saw the expenses, the liability that was not recorded as an expenditure exceeding the budget by millions of dollars? Did you contact
You're
them?
mixing a couple different things.
No, I'm very simple. Let me try to answer again.
Let
I'll
me ask
tell you
this,
like
did
fun.
you spent so much time in Brian's office, did you?
Did I do what, Rita?
Did you contact Joe about the discrepancies?
Yes, I did, actually. Thank you for asking.
When?
And, and when I found out about
When?
it, recently.
Okay, so all those months that you went and looked over all those bills, personally, took pictures of them, photographed them, videotaped them, you never saw anything different, except when it was brought to your attention by Ms. Denicola.
Correct, because I don't think we really have the problem you perceive it to be. And I'd like to find that out. And I love that you're surprised, and I think it's great. So let's get a fact. I invited Joe here. Is Joe here? There you go. Hi, Joe.
Can I say something?
Yeah, I'd love for you to join in. Thank you.
I mean, this is a public meeting, but my firm handles servicing, and I mentioned this to Mr. Bradford. We do all the servicing to employees. I don't, like Mr. Cleaver said, I don't set budgets. There's some other gentlemen here that handle stop loss, and you know, we're not affiliated, but we kind of work together on managing the district program. And Gene and I deal with employees, employee issues, retirees, set meetings with Highmark. If the business office or Brian asked us to be involved in helping with budgets and analysis that, he would ask us at the time, but he didn't. And I know Tim and Dave are more involved in the financing side of things, and maybe they could speak to that. But I just want to make sure that I'm a private business owner in Carbon County, and born and raised in this community, along with Gene. You know, we want to continue to just do the servicing for the district. And I know there's changes that are coming up, but we just want to continue to do the servicing. And I felt we were kind of left a little short with the RFP process. So I don't know if there's any opportunity to change that, but you know, I'm trying to protect my business here. I have a lot of other clients in the area, and I don't want this to get out like ETA made some recommendation, or I already get approached by people saying you cost the Lehighton School District $3.6 million. I mean, because it gets flipped around in the newspaper because people don't understand insurance. We do a really good job. We've done a great job here. JJ acknowledged us last fall at the RAH meeting. We're fortunate to have an organization like ours to help our employees, and now we're kind of on our way out by July 1st. I mean, if there's any opportunity to change this, maybe we could meet at a separate time, but
I think just for clarification, like just the budget office sets our district budget.
And what was the district's budget last year for this expense item?
Well, I would like to go back 3 years, actually.
Let's just do one and see
No, I
where
think
we're at.
3.
I know you think that.
No.
I'd just like to ask for one. What was last year's budget? Healthcare, sorry.
Can I,
Hold on, please.
So we're making a statement that we budgeted low by $3.4 million.
That's not what was said. What was said was that the expenses of the district for the current year, every month, you were not seeing in the expense reports the full cost the district was incurring. That's what is being said, that and that only.
But you're saying that the costs were incurred and they were put where? Just not in a budget summary report, is what you're saying?
Correct, because that budget summary report is your revenue and your expenditures. It does not include your balance sheet.
But it talks about personnel benefits. Would this be considered part of those personnel benefits?
There would be that along with a number of other items in personnel benefits. VP's cost, FICA cost,
Well,
all the costs of an employee.
Well, according to the budget report, I see them listed as personal benefits, current budget, $6.8 million, period to date, $4.2 million, and year to date, $4.2 million. Percent used in this report was 61%. So I see them allocated by Brian in reports provided to us. How are we not seeing them? Can you show me where it's not reported? I mean, I know it's a negative, but can you show me how it's not being reported?
We said it in the budget summary. That's what we just said. The budget summary sheet.
The budget summary sheet is what you're saying it was not recorded in, correct? I'll check with Wiz. They were understated, right? And payments were not in the expenditure reports. They were coded to an account code and were not shown as a budget summary report. I'm showing that they are. So
There would be a number of other expenditures in that.
I agree with that, but my
You
question.
would have to run the full, I could run the full detail, I could have somebody run the full detail for the entire year and show you each individual posting to the 200 object accounts, so you could see when things were recorded.
And where they were reported, I respect. But my question again is that these expenses were incurred. They're not hidden. When I heard we were $3 million unrecorded, hidden, not found in the right spot, not put in the right spot, nothing. I look at business finance as a chess game, and all the pieces are on the board. Depending on who's in the seat and they decide how to move them is up for interpretation. But at the end of the day, those same pieces are on the board until captured, until consumed. So if we didn't have an overconsumption, we should have still been within our budget. If you're making a statement that we overconsumed $3.4 million, that's a different answer. And we have insurance for stuff like that because of our stop loss. But if you're telling me that we just put the piece in a different spot on the board and that this board didn't see it, I'm under the impression that I saw it, you saw it, the rest of the board should have saw it. I mean, we got our reports that are there. So I'm trying to figure out where this stress, this $3.5 million of missing expenditures are not being shown to the board. I don't think that that's the same concept.
Here's these missing expenditures, it's that the budget that was approved didn't include the actual information that we were going off of. So when we put a budget together for 18-19 for this current year, as we did in the presentation on last Monday, you could see that for the 200 benefits, we had 11.5 budgeted, and to date we spent 14.9. So that's.
And yet last year, we only spent 6.8?
No. For, no. I don't have that information.
So what did you have budgeted for that?
Could I continue, please? Because you're making it sound like this is just a benefit, this is just a part of the issue. For example, supplies.
Well, now let's focus on the benefits, because that's why we're here for the main priority, and that's what I'm discussing. Please don't change the subject.
It's not just benefits.
I understand that, but let's deal with one piece of this puzzle at a time. Right now, we're talking about budget benefits, and you're saying that since it was underreported to the finance committee prior to them doing their budget for this year, that it was underreported. You're shaking your head.
That's
So,
what I said.
okay, so let's make sure we hear it. Just focus on the benefits. Tell me again what you said. I'm a fifth grader.
What I'm saying is the budget that was approved had $11.5 million budgeted in the 200 code for benefits. This was presented last Monday. You have it on your presentation that was given on Monday. Year to date, there was $14.9 million that was spent in that area. Other areas also.
Well, we'll stick to the 200, right? So of the $14.9 million that was consumed, spent, versus what we thought we were going to use at the beginning of the year, which was 11.5. So what was the budget for last year? If we consumed 14.9.
For what year? I don't have that. No, I'm going off the presentation.
Well, last year. If we spent 14.9 last year, this year, call it, right? Whatever you want to. Year ending 2019.
Year ending June 30th, 2019.
Of 2019, what did we have originally budgeted for the 200 code?
For 18-19?
Yes.
So we said
That would be
$11,577,008.
11 million.
You have a copy of this.
I understand. I'm asking a question.
11.5 million.
11.5 million. Okay. So somewhere along the line, we were budgeting 11.5, and the district consumed 14.9. Am I correct in that statement?
That is what we currently today have paid out under the 200 cat benefits for everything. That's everything.
I agree. So we had budget 11.5, and we put together expenditures that equal 14.9.
That is all benefits, everything.
That's healthcare, dental, PSERS, FICA, it's all
Everything.
benefits.
It's
Right.
not just health.
And we got the 11.5 million that we had a budget for, and then somewhere along the line, if we're gonna have a higher budget, a higher amount than what we're supposed to be spending, the first dollar over 11.5 million, and please make sure I read this right. That unless there are sufficient funds in the treasury of a district to pay the same, meaning an individual budget amount, a separate order shall be drawn for each account or payment. This is School Code 607. So how did we spend on these expenditure reports, or I'm sorry, these check reports, more than 11.5 prior to knowing about it? How did this board,
That's your question?
I understand, But the question I'm gonna ask
Question
again,
is, did
according
any of the
to-
reports show us at 100% consumption of our benefit budget?
yeah,
When?
so my question
No,
is,
when? I asked you, any of our budget summary reports ever show us at 100% or nearing 100% of our budgetary consumption for benefits?
absolutely not.
Absolutely not, it didn't.
So my question again,
So my question would be, how would we know if we wouldn't see it on the budget summary reports?
well, the budget summary report, if I'm not mistaken, do have the expenditures, but they're just classified as a liability. Am I correct?
Classified as a liability, David, would not be on an expenditure report.
Correct. So this board saw these things, including myself, yeah, and I recognize them as within budget. So the question becomes, the statement is,
I'm trying to figure out what you recognize as within budget.
right, so my understanding is 11.5 million. So what I'd like to ask is twofold. One is, how do you spend $3.4 million, right? More than you budgeted without an alarm being raised. And before you answer that question, let's make sure we understand that our old business manager, let me finish, our old business manager, Mr. Brian Fike, had this understanding of transparency that was wonderful, and I respect him greatly. I think he did a fantastic job. And the reason I can say that is because he was the most trustworthy guy in this district, and I'll say it more than once. The reason I feel that he's the most trustworthy guy is because he allowed me, or anybody, to trust him and then verify what he did. So if we trust and verify, we can add to that trust. We'll never stop verifying. I mean, even the simplest clerk in a store is going to hand over their cash drawer to the next person. We'll trust them and verify that they add up the same amount to make sure they're even. And as soon as there's a discrepancy, a manager, a board, a person will come in and check those responsibilities. So if you're trying to make the suggestion that Brian allowed something to go over budget by $3.4 million, I find that hard to believe, so therefore I'd like to trust, but verify, our new business manager and this board to find out where the $3.4 million came from, and it sounds like it came from to pay these bills for this liability. But so, if you don't mind, sure. This is someone from our stop loss policy.
Dave Fisher, I'm here with Tim Sears. Hi, everybody. We've met probably once or twice before. Just a quick question. I'm listening. I'm interested, obviously. I'm here. Thank you for the business the last 2 years, and we're not here to try to get the business back. We're here to try and help you guys resolve an issue. And I want to make sure that nobody thinks that we did anything wrong. But I guess my first question, the business manager for this upcoming budget said $6.4 million for health care. Is that correct, Patricia? 6.4 for 19 to 20 healthcare. So when we got involved 2-3 years ago, when the district was with Benetcon, the budget, I don't know if it was in the budget, but I know what the premium payments were because you were sending a check every month to Benetcon for $500,000. That would be $6 million. And you're at 6.4 a couple of years later, with healthcare trends being 7-8%, not all so bad. My question is this: when you put all the numbers on the right lines where they belong, after you corrected everything Brian supposedly did wrong, what were the actual budget numbers for healthcare for this most recent year? What was the actual expenditures just for healthcare, not the 11 million?
I would have to pull that out. I only have
Well, I'm willing to bet
everything
that it's probably within $6 million once you get it all together. So, and I'm asking the other question I would ask, again, as a bystander, sitting back, I'm not an accountant, okay? I'm an insurance broker for 40 years and I'm not an expert, even after 40 years, okay? But I'm just curious, when you look at last year's budget versus actual expenses, are you telling us that the district was over budgeted? You spent $3.5 million more than what was budgeted from last year's budget? Is that what we're saying?
Almost 50% over.
Well, I'm saying just the total budget.
Yeah, I understand that, but you're talking about 100.
What we're trying to say is, number one, this is not just, I know as much as people think and called you and told you all this stuff, this is not just
I
an
understand.
insurance issue. For example, our budget for just these, we use special education, this was part of our presentation on Monday. We, in 16-17, spent $797,000 in special education costs. In 2017-18, we actually spent $997,000 in education costs. In the 18-19 budget, that budget line is $680,000. So, again, I think the issue, people are trying to say this is an insurance issue. There is an issue because what we had budgeted and what we approved was not really
Totally accounted for.
exactly.
But now it's all put back together, right, JJ?
Well, we're working on it.
Yeah,
Well,
we're
then-
working on it.
so
So
the-
what we're doing is the budget that we currently have is based off the actual expenditure. So for example, 1920, we had a budget summary presentation in January, a finance meeting in January, where that line item was $680,000, even though in 17-18, we spent $997,000. So what we're saying for the new 1920 budget is we are expecting $1.1 million, because everyone knows those costs go up. So that is part of the discussion. Again, I don't want it to be construed that this is just because of the there's
Well,
other lying factors, even though, and we understand where we're at and everything else. So what we're saying is this budget, based upon our trends and based upon what we are looking, we're looking at that larger shortfall for next year based upon that information.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to your budget shortfalls and all that kind of stuff, but I'm more sensitive to making sure that when it comes to the healthcare expenditures, that you know what you're doing, you're gonna be going forward, doing the right thing, all that kind of stuff, just because I appreciate the 2 years that we were able to spend here. And I can only tell you that, you know, I heard that there was a $3.5 million shortfall on your health insurance claims. That can't be. That just can't be. Do you guys all understand how healthcare works?
But again, it's not healthcare. You
Okay.
misunderstood. It's that
Okay.
whole line item of 200 benefits.
But in the
I'll sit
paper,
down.
it was physically discussing the,
Thank you.
And it's not just 200, that 200, that's special ed, there's
Right.
cyber school payment, there's all these other things that equal that. But again,
Right.
it's not just benefits.
Right, well,
Superintendent, if I could just make one cautionary comment. I just want, and I'm hearing you that it's not all healthcare, but the one thing I do want to alert everyone to, and I understand.
can you introduce yourself again?
Tim Sears. I was involved in looking at the Benetcon arrangement for several years, and did a study of whether the school district was winning or losing inside the Benetcon consortium. And in fact, for, I don't know, a period of 4 years, they were a loser in the consortium because they had better risks. So we wound up moving the stop loss. But at any rate, the reason I'm, burst in here is there's a time limit on submission on the stop loss. And that time limit is, I believe, 6:30. So to the extent any of the shortfall is because of excessive claims, you have ag protection at 115% corridor. I'm just concerned that the claims are submitted timely. There's an interface between Highmark and Vista. At different times it has to be watched. It sounds like you're aware of the time limit, so I just want everybody to be aware. Look, if there's a shortfall here, you have some protection for it. To the extent it's because you're going over your ag protection.
As our stop loss carrier, did you see during any of this period of time an over consumption of what you predicted for your assets? So let me just make sure I get this straight. When an employee has a claim, it goes through Highmark. ETA administers that claim through Highmark on a per head basis. And if the claim goes over, I believe, $60,000, 70? 70.
First year was 60.
If it goes over 70,000, if that claim is more than $70,000, something catastrophic took place. Since the district is self-insured, we protect ourselves by buying a second policy called stop loss that your company administers for us. so that claims over $70,000
Get reimbursed.
get reimbursed so that we don't suffer this huge hit. And we pay a premium for it, it's a risk management. And therefore, did you guys get any of these claims that showed up as this $3.4 million?
There's a normal reporting process between Highmark and Vista, who is the administrator for Companion Life,
Yep.
an A+ carrier. And the first year, there's really high claims. The second year, there was, some claims, but not a lot. Now,
We only were involved through April.
yeah, since that time, if there's been an uptick, we just have to make sure, we close the loop, making sure that Highmark is in fact delivering them, because you have to manage Highmarks many times, as you, I'm sure know, and they will miss the payment, and you could actually,
Miss your reimbursement?
miss the reimbursement to the extent you have reimbursement for, $300,000. If you don't submit it timely, unlike other insurance, you can lose that.
But up to April 1st, were you aware of anything that hit that radar?
Well, there's always some claims that are reported. There wasn't a lot of claims. Maybe there was a claim of $200,000. There were some more minor claims. You have warning claims at approximately half the specific.
But up to April 1st, you didn't have anything that was so significant that would cause us? Okay.
No.
And then after April 1st, you were no longer getting the information to make that determination, correct?
Right. Based on the board's decision.
What were we based on the board's decision?
With regard to the insurance.
The insurance.
That doesn't start till effective July 1st. So we can't do anything with anybody until July 1st.
Okay. Vista sent me a copy of a letter that was dated 4/1 that said the district was having BSI manage that.
But that's effective July 1st.
Well, we don't know what the board decided, we just know what the letter said.
Yeah.
But the letter said July 1st.
Not
But
that-
they still,
No, the letter does say.
I have a copy of the letter. It says that this new company, BSI, the one that Patty used to work for, has been assigned and appointed to the Lehighton Area School District as the agent of record, effective immediately, meaning April 1st.
Right.
So BSI is authorized to solicit proposals, which we would respect that they can do that, and that's a very standard letter.
Yes.
But what I'm asking is different, because this letter also says, and it was signed for by Jonathan Cleaver, that we are aware that BSI benefits will be receiving commissions from carriers and request the commission be payable effective that July 1st. So prior to that, are you administering these claims or are they?
Let me explain to you how the insurance business works.
Sure, please.
First of all, when you have a broker of record change like that, many times what will happen, the in-force insurance carrier will not recognize from a compensation standpoint the new broker until maybe the first of the month following 30 days of the submission of that letter.
Right.
Typically, it's pretty commonplace when that happens, and it just so happens that there's a couple months involved here between April and July. Typically when that happens, the newly appointed broker takes over servicing, doesn't get compensated for that first month or two. And that's not necessarily unstandard.
But you'd get the copies of that information.
And once that happens, once that broker of record is put into place, which Vista was sent that broker of record, they don't talk to the incumbent broker anymore, the losing broker, which was us.
I agree.
So all of a sudden, we have no access to any information at all as of April 1st, and BSI, if they were the winning broker, they would take over from that point forward and start to get compensated on anything going forward after July.
But the district would be paying only, you would be getting the fees.
The
It was
fees
to
would
you.
still come to us, because as I said just a minute ago,
But they come from Companion.
they're coming from the insurance, from Companion, not from the district. We were being paid a commission, not a per head fee.
Right. But then is the information or the data sent to you transparently so that you can make an evaluation?
No.
I think you're aware of this.
The data would go from Highmark to the carrier. The
Not-
data
not-
would
All
go
right,
to them.
with BSI, managing, Highmark to make sure that they process and pay the claims, and managing Companion as well, making sure that everything's being done.
Is there a BSI representative here?
I was unaware that it was the insurance meeting. budgeting, had I known, it would have
It's
been.
budget, and this is a big part of our budget. So the question I'm asking is if the budget changed from 11.5 is what we proposed that we were gonna be spending, and now you're spending 14.9 as an actual, and then you're gonna use that number moving forward, right? That we should find out where this shortfall is, and if as of April 1st there wasn't any indication of it, my documents show no indication of it, the reports to the board show no indication, but yet you found it, we'd like to know what you found and where it was found.
I think that was part of our presentation last time.
It was, but there were specifics done, so something, somehow, a claim, something occurred equal to $3.4 million. And it had to be after April 1st, and it shows up on our reports of everything that we're doing. I've been only able to collect the transparent information from Brian, who I trust and verify, but we've not been able to get the information since then. So the question is, what occurred between April and now that equals $3.4 million that we're claiming, and this is the biggest part, claiming to be a shortfall?
Dave, we're gonna leave. Thank you, everybody, for the last 2 years. If I can just make one recommendation, and I would strongly advise that you do this, from what I'm hearing, and then, for whatever it's worth, if I were you, I would probably reach out to Brian Fike and have a conversation with Brian Fike and ask him to get involved in what went on here.
I did. Thank you for suggesting.
Thanks for the invite.
Did anybody ask Brian besides myself? Larry, did you call him? No. You didn't?
No, I did not.
Just blind trust here. We didn't have any verification. Nobody called up Brian? Nobody? Besides myself? Blind trust.
We go along right back to Philip.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So according to school code, hold on a second, I was gonna say something. According to school code, the report and direction, information to directors for tax levy or budget, must be provided to every school director. Furnish the incoming board, which would be us, school directors, all necessary information and such detailed statements that may be needed to provide for an annual tax levy or prepare for the annual estimate of expenditures, which is what you're trying to do. And at the same time, the reporting is under 613, and the illegal use is under 610, and the individual liability is under 608, and the right to not exceed a budget line item is a 609, and our insurance is covered under section 513. This information has not been provided to your board transparently, and in a lackadaisical manner, I want to make the statement very simply that even though we collect this data without a cooperative, subordinate administration, this board rubber stamps information without even having access to it. They don't even know. And when they're done doing that, it's those taxpayers that end up having to pay the fee. So I look at this as just a financial shuffle. Because unless you're telling me that this district went out and spent money it didn't have, which would be irresponsible and immoral, that we should not be in this position. Secondly, I'll make the statement that when you do a budget, instead of looking at last year's numbers and like you just did, wagged an extra couple $100,000 on top because everything goes up, you go the other direction, Mr. Cleaver. When you generate a budget, and I'll ask my board if they did it this way, you take the look at the income you're projected and then put some aside for rainy day savings, and then look at the 90 or 95% of what you're projected and say, how am I going to consume these dollars for those students when I take it from these citizens? Because that's what you're doing. Anything more than what's lawfully required by Pennsylvania school code would be giving away charity benefits to individual members of this community. And rather than giving away a charity benefit, it's not ours to give. So we have a responsibility to look at the actual budget based upon what we perceive to be spent from what we collect. So if you're going to take in 100% and you're telling me that 30% is going to manpower, and a certain percent is going to the benefits, you've doubled your benefits number. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct, but that's your understanding. Again, I'd like to go back to the information at the beginning of the meeting, to the effect that really, when you look at the amount that we pay and the benefits that are already assigned that are required, there's about a $5 million piece of our budget that we have flexibility in. And I think that's important for, people to understand. With the 15 million, non-personnel related costs, 1.5 million for mandated charter schools, 1.73 million for the support of CCTI, 234,000 for LTRC, 20,000 in support for the, we started putting these things together. So there's $5.13 million of other expenditures that include supplies, books, technology repairs, occupational costs, and other things. So,
But I'm looking at a different side of it. You're telling me that between PSERS and benefits, you're looking at $13.4 million.
actually more.
She just said it's 7 plus 6.4. 7 for PSERS and 6.4 for benefits. 13.4, thank you. So if we're at 13.4, how are you saying that we're $3.8 million short? It sounds like someone's moving money that didn't talk to this board prior to moving it. That's what I'm saying. And my question is, are we moving money that this board did not approve? And where I couldn't find in the minutes, I can't find anywhere where the board approved to move this money that we wrote these checks for outside of your budget. And if that's the case, we don't have the transparency from you as our minister and you as our business manager. And I don't think you have the information to even form this budget other than this WAG idea that you take last year's numbers and you add to it, which is totally irresponsible as a board of directors.
Those are actual expenses. Those are actually what we spend on an average year to year, going back and looking 2 and 3 years.
And it's our responsibility as a board, a business person, a manager of this district, to not just look at the mistakes that occurred in years past and then repeat them moving forward, but recognize that this board has been on a path of overconsumption, overtaxation, overborrowing for nearly a decade, and nobody put the checks and balances back in the system. And it's our job to do that now. And if you're going to put these checks and balances back in the system so you don't have furloughs and you don't have reduction in benefits, we should look at what money we have coming in and decide how we want to spend it based upon the Pennsylvania school code that says you are required to spend it here. As you mentioned, there's certain mandates associated with this policy. If not, this district is spending more than it has, and it has 2 choices. Take it from them, or fail and let the state come in and make the adjustments that they need. Now, I checked the Auditor General reports to other districts that are in this predicament, and a good portion of it is because of the morality of a school board that chooses to spend more than they have on items that are not needed by school code. We need to stop that practice. The decades of the past boards doing that exact practice is why we're in this predicament. And until we correct that morality, you're going to be in a shortfall. And you're looking at consuming all of your fund balance in one swipe over to benefits. Can I get a show of hands of how many people believe that we should only spend what we take in and not a penny more? Right? So then why would you have a budget that shows a shortfall of $3.8 million?
It's a proposed budget, and that's the actual expenses from last year, Mr. Bradley.
Why would you
Why
propose?
didn't we have a proposed budget in January that showed $230,000 being used from the general fund? Why did we have that if these numbers were in line? I don't believe our numbers must have been in line for a January proposal either.
Rather than running the bus over Brian Fike,
I'm not
no
running
one.
the bus. Did I say any name?
I
I'm not
did.
running
I
any
did.
bus. You did.
I did.
Right.
Because
So
in the
you're
paper.
inferring that that's not
Hold
my
on.
take. I'm trying to figure out how we get out of it, not, and I understand you want to do your revisionist, so we don't go down a road of whatever, which is fine. But we don't have to go down it for 40 minutes because we heard it last week as well. We got to try to figure out how we're going to get out of here.
The
Not
first
how we
step.
got in.
Right, the
Okay,
first
we
step
know how
though
we
is.
got in it because we got some things that showed up differently.
Actually not. I think that what you have is
So
this
you're-
inability.
So you have your CPA and you have business administrator knowledge and you have all of this wrapped up with your experience level with your business? Is that why you think that things aren't going right? Or what is your interpretation of how we got here? Is your interpretation that somebody's not doing something correctly, that there's covert operations? What is it? You might as well get it out.
Okay, thank you. So as a business owner, it's my responsibility to hire CPAs, to hire insurance providers, to hire subcontractors, and the buck stops with me. As a board, a government,
Okay,
let me finish. As a board,
Move along, please.
as a government, we have administrators that we hire that we have our direct contract with. We have a business manager that we have a direct contract with. She works for us, not him. She works for us.
but you figured out.
I
I
will.
understand that.
She works for
You
us.
can
This
say
board,
she without pointing at her. We all
it's
know she
okay,
is.
out of respect. The idea is that this board is where the buck stops. So when we had a projected budget that was a shortfall for the next 4 years moving forward, and to be honest with you, for the last couple of years
We had a
before,
projected budget in January of $200,000,
Shortfall.
which that gap was going to be closed.
and one more time, it was a shortfall. You should never project for a shortfall. But the reality is, when you did do that, it was immoral. In my opinion, it was immoral, and I brought it up multiple times. And the fact that next year's and the next year's and the next year's were all at a negative, I considered that immoral. My personal opinion, 1 of 9. When you're a board, and in January, like you said, your projected shortfall was only $200,000, whereas that is immoral, it is grossly immoral to now be $3.4 million, which shows me that the board, this board, did not do its job of holding this business accountable and our subcontractors accountable for those people that we answer to, because we work for them.
I kind of agree that this is a surprise. That
It shouldn't be a surprise.
No, it shouldn't be. I kind of agree that when someone new came in, we found that things were different.
Thank you. So the first thing that I
And
would
I'm not
do,
throwing anyone under the
I won't-
bus.
I won't.
Because
So-
that's what you want.
I
We
don't
got
want
to
to
figure
throw
out
you.
how to get out of it.
I understand that. So the first way you
They
figure.
need an insurance lesson tonight either.
Can I please finish my sentence, Larry? Can I? The first thing you do when you find out that the person you used to have hired and the person
We're
you...
back to calling him. We can't.
One more time. The first thing you do when you have the person that used to do this responsible for your business and the new person that's doing this job for your business is to have them communicate. And the second thing you do is you oversee that communication to make sure it happens. So I did meet with Mr. Brian Fike, and I reviewed the information that was published in the paper, that the way that he did things was not the way other people would do them. And prior to just assuming, trusting, and not verifying the way that Patty did it, I went through the records to prove that what he did was accurate. So now my question is only here to trust Patty, but I'd like her to verify where's this discrepancy. And that's my only question. I do trust you. I'd like you to verify it. And since you work for this board, can you verify where that $3.8 million has been consumed?
I mean, again, we're sitting here, first of all, the $3.8 million.
It's a question. Can we do that or not? It's a trust and verify.
Is
Why can't it be verified?
because this is the
We
We could run an account detail of every single account code on our revenue and expenses. I can show you exactly how much has been spent in each and every 900 line item account and how much was budgeted for that line item. I would be happy to print that for you and share it with you.
And between when you were hired now until now, this board has not been given that information, correct?
The board has continued to receive all the information that they got in the past.
Right, but we don't have the information you're offering now.
No, I'm offering it to you now.
I agree, but we haven't received it before that.
You are absolutely correct.
Excellent. So transparency is the answer to your current existing problem. But without that transparency, you're sitting here.
Well, exactly, we're sitting here because somewhere along the line there was a miscalculation. That's why we're sitting here.
Actually, I believe there was an immoral responsibility by a board to say two things. One is you projected to spend more than you had, first immorality, and the second is you kept spending it after the bank was empty when school code says you're not allowed to do that.
How do we know we're not supposed to do something if someone didn't alert us to that it's happened?
It's, I really wish you could understand this.
No, I wish you could understand it. If you don't
Transparency.
How come you didn't see that you overspent on that account?
Because
none of us got it in our budget summaries, Mr. Bradley. And that's supposed
It's
to be
actually in the budget
gospel of
summary.
how you're.
It's in the budget summary. I'm sorry. It's in the budget summary, right here. It tells you the benefits, it tells you what you have. It's in your budget summary. You're not over budget.
It's fine. Okay, everything's great then. Then why are we having a meeting?
Thank you, and that's what we're here to answer. The question is, it's in our budget summary. It was not listed. It is proved that we did pay certain amounts, not that much. So where is this missing money, Mr. Stern? And the only way to answer it is to stop rubber stamping this administration and get the facts first.
Mr. Bradley,
Yes, ma'am.
since you spoke to Mr. Fite, could you tell us, what did he have to say?
He's walking out.
He's walking out.
At this point, I mean, we're getting nowhere, unfortunately.
Not getting nowhere.
With this situation.
She asked a very good question. Hold on. She asked a very good question, and it's an excellent question. And it would be nice if this board would be transparent and respect their responsibility to these taxpayers and know that our job is to get that information and then give it to these people, because at the end of the day, we propose a budget to you guys, and you're the ones that are supposed to be looking at
all
it.
that. Can you just please tell us what Brian said? That's all I want to know, Dave. I don't need the rest of the detail.
Sure. He said that the responsibility of marking these expenditures is solely within the business administration market. And therefore, the only way that I'm going to find it is to get the detail that she's finally going to give to us.
Finally willing, you just asked for it.
Thank you. I didn't even know to ask, because as a business person, Larry, I
You should
listen
know
to
as a
people.
business person
Trust-
ask for a full chart detail of your accounts. If you're a
Trust-
businessman,
trust
if you
and
have a
verify.
CPA,
Trust
you
and
should know
verify.
that he gives you a complete ledger and how it's
And
accounted.
since I can trust and verify them like I do with my own business, and I check them,
That information.
I know that he's accurate. So now the question becomes, where is the inaccuracy?
Right.
And I asked it 2 months ago, I asked it again, I'm asking it now. And to be perfectly blunt, if a subordinate of mine came into a meeting and said, I don't have that information when we were looking at it, they'd be on the hot seat, not me, which is fine. And I respect that if it's in there and you can go get it real quick, please do.
No, it's not a real quick thing, I'm sure.
You can't, $3.8 million, we can't
Why do
find.
you have to laugh?
Because $3.8 million is a lot of money.
This is a serious issue. It's very serious.
You know
We
what else is
understand
serious,
how
Larry?
serious it is.
You know what else is serious? This district called up the Lehighton Borough and told them we couldn't afford, we couldn't afford a $200 fire police bill because we're broke.
Mr. Bradley, totally inaccurate.
I beg to differ. But before we change subject, like you like to do,
No.
I'm just gonna make a statement.
I'm finishing the subject you brought up, Mr. Bradley.
Fine, love to hear it.
That is not the case.
Please explain.
What we said is that it was not in the budget, it was not a budget item, and that we had alternative methods to do for graduation. That's what was said. So again.
So you're saying that we're not gonna hire the fire police, or we are?
Again, we're at a budget meeting.
Are we gonna hire the fire police with this budget or not?
We do not have them coming and doing graduation, no.
but we haven't for years in the past. And who are we gonna have do this job? Because before we decide on something like that, this board should make that decision, because I tell you what, from what I heard, that you're gonna use underclassmen to do the task of a fire policeman, puts this district at significant liability, and most of these budgets will be busted with one oops in comparison to a $200 donation to the fire police. And if this district didn't have it in the budget, we as a responsible party, a board, should raise our hand to the community to which we serve and say, we would like this money, however, we did not budget it, we made a mistake. Can you please correct our mistake? And I already offered, I'll put in my 20 bucks, we need 9 more people for 20 bucks to protect all of our children from that liability and to protect all these participants at this graduation and have professionals do a job. We hire professionals, Mr. Stern. Are we doing the fire police or are we doing students?
I'm not going to continue to, deal with this. Mr. Bradley, were you on the board for 1718?
Say out loud so we can hear
I just
them.
wondered when we did the budget discussions in 1718, you were on the board, correct?
Correct. So why do we think we have a shortfall, Mr. Cleveland? Where is it?
No, I just have a question. Any other thing for discussion? Or anything from the public for open discussion?
I have 2 questions since we're on that subject. Who is Kelly Sheptok?
Excuse me?
Who is Kelly Sheptok?
She is an employee for BSI.
BSI. And who's Tony Del Rey?
That is also BSI.
He's a big BSI guy?
BSI, yeah.
How do we-
BSI in your packet, you would,
Right, so how do we get in touch with those 2 people as a board? Does anybody have their contact information from this board?
We
'Cause they-
had it from the meeting.
that was an RFP.
Yeah,
They
we
were
had
doing
it
the
from the
presentation.
Do you have it?
No, with me.
I know,
have it.
but you have it. Did you call them at all? Or talk to them at
No,
all?
I spoke to them here.
Okay. And when we did that proposal, and they did
We had
their,
a public meeting.
Yeah.
yeah, when you did that, when you had that conversation with them here, you did an interview of their process. And then the second part of that was to bring the top selectors, top whatever tier back for an in-depth interview. Why was that part skipped?
We talked about this before a couple times and the answer hasn't changed yet.
Okay,
Not to me.
all right. So how are they connected to you, Mr. Gensler, those 2 people? Do you know them anywhere other than through relationships here?
Who's that?
Is Kelly Sheptok or Mr. Sheptok?
I do not know Kelly Sheptok.
Okay. Do you know her dad? You don't think you do, or possible? Possibly or probably? 2 different words.
Who's her father?
Okay. Do you know Mr. Cleveland?
Do I know them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Then you know her dad?
They work with districts that we worked with before.
Sure. And you know their dad, right?
I know lots of them, yes.
Okay. Who is in charge of all the contracts with the district?
Who's in charge of?
Yeah, who's in charge of all the contracts with the
Who
district?
holds the contracts?
Yeah,
Who's the business office?
okay. What does school code say about it?
I know it's a loaded question, so just do it.
No, I want to ask,
No,
because,
just do it.
okay,
I
the
don't know
board,
school
sir.
code. I didn't look
You
it
are.
up because I didn't set anybody up on a school code question, so
I know.
why don't you enlighten us?
It's the board, Mr. Stern, from your, how many years of
I didn't say
experience
who
do you have on
held-
this board?
I said, you didn't say who holds them.
Now,
I
who's in
just said
charge
who's
of
in
the
charge.
contract?
We approve them, the business office then holds them.
Okay, and who's in charge of them, is my question. Who is in charge of all contracts with the district?
The board approves contracts.
Right, the board is in charge of all of them.
Okay?
So if we are $3.4 million over budget on a item, it's our contract with Tim that just left and the other guy.
Mr. Bradley, we are not $3.4 million on one budget, please. please. It's ridiculous. I mean, we see repeated the same thing.
You're saying that it was moved from an expenditure, or not, from a liability to an expenditure.
Any more questions?
Public open
May I
discussion.
have a few questions? Patricia, what would you recommend when you build your budget? A percentage in each of your high-end categories. What would you recommend for your override into the new year so that we're not shortchanging if we have some major issues that come up? You know what I'm saying? And then we're overexpending it and
If
so
you
on.
have the revenue available, you would budget for a budgetary reserve. Whether, sometimes in a budget this size, if you put $100,000 aside, you would put $100,000 as an individual line item for unforeseen expenses,
Okay,
pending available revenue sources.
okay. Have we done that in this past year's budget for 18, 19?
I don't believe so, but I don't believe so, but I have to double check that.
No, not according to the budget at a glance, there's zero for budgetary reserve. I just looked at it before I came here.
Okay. My next question is when the new Keyser system goes in, and when you have your new people coming into the system, that number will fluctuate a little bit lower because of the way that is designed. But you're not going to see that until you're hiring new people.
It will not actually. There will be a lower employer contribution for new
Right.
employees. However, the certified PSERS rate, the difference between that certified PSERS rate and the contribution rate for new employees, that difference is still going into PSERS. It's not going into the individual's account, it's going into PSERS as a whole.
Is that because of the unfunded liability piece?
Correct,
Okay,
correct,
okay, so that's where it's being compensated.
correct.
Okay. So, my understanding at tonight's finance meeting, we were gonna take a look at the overexpends in the three main areas and what can the board do to bring in more revenues and cut this and do that from now until June 30th, and then take a look at whether or not we need to have a tax increase for this upcoming year or not. Was that the goal of this meeting, or was that my imagination?
That was part
Part
of
of
the
the goal?
discussion and one that happened.
Okay. Okay, so then we're ready for that next phase. Okay.
Can you repeat that PSERS comment? We have an unfunded liability with the state, and,
The state as a whole has an unfunded pension liability.
correct, and we were given our portion of that, which was how much?
I would have to pull out the statements, I don't know that offhand.
Ballpark?
I don't know that offhand.
Okay, and then, so part of the cash flow in moving money to the PSERS account, are we just moving the allocated 34%, or are we moving
We
extra?
only send to PSERS based upon the PSERS certified rate.
Which is the 34%.
Correct. Under the new section of PSERS that was passed, effective July 1st, 2019, new employees will have different pension options. They will not have the strictly just the defined benefit traditional PSERS plan. The required employer contribution on new employees is going to be less into the individual's account. However, the school district is still required to submit, based upon the PSERS certified rate, the difference between what goes into the employee's individual account for the employer contribution and up to the PSERS certified rate is still going to go into PSERS to fix the statewide unfunded liability.
And how much did this year's budget change? You usually use a couple of years back, right? You were looking at, you said 3 or 5, how many years did you go back? When you were filling out this budget?
I said 3, so
3 years?
what
Okay.
information would you like?
So the question is, what was our interest budget line item 3 years ago?
I would have to pull that out.
Was it less than $1.9 million?
I have no idea, I will have to pull that out.
No problem.
So my other question is the board, because I'm trying to understand that difference between a budget summary and the expenditure pullout. So what will the board now get so that we make sure that everything is transparent and they know exactly what is being put on the books, as we say.
I think it would be helpful to get additional information, meaning a different breakout of the budget summary report that groups it by line item, maybe by function in total, then by object in total. So you can look, this is what we're spending on all our salary costs. This is what we budgeted, this is where we're at. All our benefit costs, they would be the 200 object. This is what we budgeted, this is where we're at. I think more information is going to be more meaningful.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a statement. Patty, I'd like to compliment you on your professionalism. And I'm going to end this with a question. But part of the benefit of the back and forth a multitude of times is that I think I understand the essence of the issue. In January, we had a report that reflected a $230,000 deficit. And now that deficit is significantly more. My question to you is, if you didn't discover this whenever you started working here in March, when would this have manifested itself? When would this have come out?
It would have come out in the audit when you were closing out your books for June 30th.
And the other point that I'd like to make, I understand the significance of where we are, but I'd like to also point out the significance of where we were. Like looking back 8 years ago or so, when we had a positive fund balance of 13.2 or whatever it was, we had roughly 50 or $52 million of identified need. And all those pieces have been pretty significantly addressed. So while I'm not trying to minimize this issue, comparatively, in my opinion, as compared with 8 years ago, we're in light year better shape. So we need to collectively try to figure out how we don't let this occur again, for one. And secondly, how we get a rope around fixing it.
Mr. Finnegan, when you were on the board back then, you said there was a $52 million shortfall. What was the budget surplus? You just said $52 million worth of needs. We'll use the word needs, that's fine. What was the budget excess at the end of those financial years? Because when I read them in the bond report, we showed we had a budget surplus. In some cases, almost $3.7 million on one, $2 million on the next year. So when you guys had the budget, how were you able to have a surplus?
That wasn't my understanding. My recollection was the reason largely that we had a $13.2 million positive trust fund balance is that we hadn't reasonably spent a nickel in 19 years. There were significant identified needs that we just, for whatever reason, were reluctant to
Kick down the road, as I think Mr. Krause had said in the past, right? Before they were handed to you, someone kicked them down the road.
So again, I'd like to just reinforce my comment so that it's not misunderstood.
Sure.
I'm not minimizing this issue. I think Patty is doing, from what I can see and hear, a good job of identifying this particular problem, and that the issue that we collectively have to work on is, how do we address this, and how do we make sure that it never occurs again?
But to your answer, the $52.5 million need.
And Mr. Bradley, that's just a casual recollection that goes back.
You're correct. It was in the feasibility study. It's not to be casual. It was physically documented and written down. Of the $52.5 million need that this district had,
and please don't quote me on.
We don't have to.
Don't quote me on that figure.
That's fine.
But the need was significant.
Significant.
We were actually confused by that trust fund balance.
It was amazing. And then the reality is, this district chose to have and incur for that need upon the backs of those individuals $100 million liability.
That's not so.
That is true.
No.
Yes, sir. We have that on the report. I can give it to you if you'd like.
What this board did, Mr. Bradley, was to positively affect this community for years to come.
But it spent our children's future doing it.
I don't believe so. I think what we did versus some other districts, and I'll name one, like Panther Valley.
How about Tamako?
I think we protected our tax base. With the advent of that hospital and the attractiveness of putting our kids into these schools, they're going to come here. Franklin's going to explode with professional people that will add to our tax base.
But what about why are we having so many kids move to charter schools? And to the fact that our district is now considering to creating their own.
That takes a smarter mind than mine.
Mr. Bradley, for someone who understands everything, we've had this law here for 4 or 5 years. So we're not creating our own.
Okay.
6 years?
Yeah.
I think the past boards were completely financially devoid of their responsibility. They overtaxed the community. The seniors moved out of the area. The tax base was abused by the decisions of this board. And the ability to have $13 million of cash in a fund balance and schools that had safety issues for our children that were not taken care of was a mistake. Thank you.
But again, Mr. Brownlee, in my recollection, that was not from overtaxing. That was from an inability to make decisions to improve.
Anytime you take in more money than you consume, it's an overtaxation. You should have given it back rather than leaving it in a fund, sitting in cash, to not repair the schools. And there was a feasibility study, and I don't know exactly when you were on the board, but there was a feasibility study done in 2011, and then the same study was done by the same organization, so there's no discrepancy in their ability to do the same job in 2014. And both reports were reviewed by this board. Some were and some were not read. And they had required safety items to be performed to our district schools, and they were ignored for those years. And not only did they not do the required safety items in those 3 years that were available to them, but the fund balance was then consumed on non-safety items for our students. And at that time, in both those meetings, in the 2011 and the 2014 study, they had a task force that included individuals within this community that said to keep those local, safe, debt-free elementary schools open that attracts people to the community, not a center. Thank you.
Mr. Bradley, if you don't have specifics on what was repaired and what was not done.
I do. They were listed in the report.
I would like to actually see them because I was the principal for many years.
I agree. You can download them.
And I know BHA is having issues with Mahoney. I know East Penn has issues with the Schleikers being able to build. So let's talk about the schools and what the real issues were, which the board did not want to address. And I am
But they had.
not getting a debate with you.
But you can find information that I got because it's published on the district website. 2011, there's a report with required repairs, safety, and then 2014, there's a report for required repair, safety, and they are identical. They were not performed.
We were past.
Yeah, I've been sitting here for an hour and a half in another meeting, 2 hours, and have heard little discussion on how we're going to close the gap, how much we need to make sure the bills are paid as far as pushing, because when the money's come in, you have bills that are paid all year long, but your tax money comes in at a certain time of year. So what is that fund balance that we need for cash flow, and how are we going to close the gap moving forward?
But Mr. Karras, even you would admit that without the detailed report from our business manager, it would be premature to assign information without data.
How do you suggest closing the gap?
By looking at the data first.
Expenses or increased taxes?
Or looking at the data and removing this discrepancy that was discovered that after discussing it with the
We've
past
already
business
been through
manager,
that, it's been explained.
You don't know
How
that
are
it's-
we- how are you gonna do it?
you did not verify that it is missing. And
There's
then-
nothing missing, it was an accounting.
It was not.
The issue.
So the point is, you did not verify it. I verified that it's not missing. Thank you.
We, at this point, is there any other comments from the public?
I have a question. Is the budget, there was a thing in the Times News today, the budget is available here. Is the budget going to be available online?
I have to double check to see if that is.
We can scan the current proposed up on the website.
Okay, just be easier than, right.
To take advantage of the opportunity of our citizens to help us with this problem, since it's their pockets that this board is trying to take the money from if they make a mistake, can we please publish that detailed report as well, Patricia? Onto the web? Thank you. And what's the avenue if we don't do a proposed budget tonight and publish it, what is our option?
This is a finance.
I know, but you have 20 days to publish it online and give the people an opportunity.
It is.
Not yet online yet, today is the day you have to do that, but my point is you have to publish it out, and then on the 30th you have to adopt it, or before, and you still need to give them a certain period of time. There's requirements.
It's available for public.
I know that, but my point is that we're not going to give it to them that they can actually see it rather than come here and get it. But my point is that it has to be approved by the 30th. Are we going to have another budget meeting after we get the details so that people like Mr. Finnegan and Mr. Kraus and Ms. Bowman can help us do this job because they were so good at it last time?
Yeah, we don't have one scheduled at this time.
I think you're going to need to because at this meeting today, all we did was identify that the reports that we were given is lacking the information that this board needs to make an educated decision.
Yeah, that is your opinion. Anything else from the public? I just want to make sure we can.
Just real quick, JJ. I understand the RFP process is over, I don't want to take more time, but since my firm kind of lost their contract July 1, can I still retain the life insurance and the disability, or was that kind of removed? Patty was checking on it, but I just want to hope that we can retain
The
that.
board has not approved or anything.
Yeah, at this point, the board did not approve a move on the life and disability.
Okay,
So there's no intention for July 1 to move that.
okay. And is there still an opportunity to quote the workers' comp in the property, or is that?
I think that one was board approved.
That one was board approved.
Yeah. The only one that wasn't, I believe, or discussed, I don't even know that Dale was other around.
And under the new agreement, do we still pay a commission on the stop loss, or is that changed?
I'm sorry, what was that, Mr. Barker? I'm sorry.
Do we still pay commission on stop loss, or has that changed?
Under the current contract, there's still commission being paid.
And the new contract,
Currently, it's out for bid, and commission has been removed from the proposals.
right, and do we still have a $2 million in aggregate coverage?
Currently, it's out to bid as it is currently written, yes.
And did we consider at all to go direct and have an employee that can manage our benefits less, since we already know the benefits is Highmark, and I mean, isn't it more economical just to allow one of our in-staff personnel to do this job?
I don't know that we have.
Our stop loss for 2019-20 was taken to the market and sent to 19 different carriers. 17 of them declined to even put forth a proposal based upon our claims experience. The work that's involved in trying to get lasers and different things removed from a contract renewal is more intense than what an individual employee could do.
I'm talking about the management side. The board can easily hire consultants to manage that part of the puzzle. We're talking about the administration of the policy once they are in place and contracted.
No,
No what?
we have not done anything.
We haven't filtered that. So if we're not going to allow our employee to do benefits within this process, what are we?
That wasn't.
Well, I mean, right now, if BSI is a broker and you have Highmark as the claims adjuster, right? Is that still going to take place, or is it going to be someone different?
It is still Highmark.
And if we have a broker that has a per head fee currently, and then our administration manages that, why do we need the broker? Why can't we just let our employees do this job? What's your answer, Jim?
There's a lot involved in that. There's an RFP, there was a process that was proposed, and there was no wording to that RFP.
But it was shortchanged. I mean, they only did a first interview.
Mr. Bradley, I'd like to mention too that Mr. Fike was the one who suggested we do the RFP. Just so you know, he was also the one who suggested we didn't do the second round because of time savings. Again, I'm not blaming him, but since he's the one you trust explicitly, I'd just like you to know that it was his plan, not my plan.
And the board is the one that makes the final decision. So when you rubber stamp his plan, you are doing nothing more than abdicating your responsibility to one of your employees instead of doing your duty as a board member. And the original plan was to do both sets of that. And if they would have done the interview set and the final set, you would not be in the position you're in today. You kicked it down the road, and here we are.
And you had left that last meeting early, ran out while we started discussion on those providers.
I actually walked out because the discussion was inappropriate to even have because you didn't have the information. I specified that. We made a video, right, in my opinion, we made a video showing you that behind door number 1, 2, and 3 is what you were doing, and you never looked behind the doors. And you didn't have any information about what was behind those doors. And the door that was missing, was to not even incur the responsibility of a broker and to do it in-house, which other districts have done, and saves them a fortune, and keeps it local so the transparency can be held so you do not have a situation where people are moving chess pieces without knowing where they're going, sir. But that's a responsibility not everybody can understand or accept.
Combine everything into one big punch bowl that isn't.
No, ma'am, that is not what I'm saying.
No.
Please don't parse my words. They're on tape.
Yeah, at this point, we are ending our finance meeting. I appreciate everyone.
Prior to that, one more sentence for this finance, hold on, for your budget. So there's a proposal that the property tax rebate can occur for individuals within the district that allows for a 30% rebate of their taxes. Did we put this proposal into our proposed budget going forward? And are we going to even consider giving those people this 30% tax break that they're doing in other districts?
We did not put that into place. And you are right, we do that at other districts. Mostly it's done at districts that have a much larger commercial tax base that they can use to offset the residential taxes. Unfortunately, in our district, we are a veteran community. We do not have the large commercial tax base that would allow us to do that.
So what you're saying is that the people in our community are going to carry this burden and we're not going to allow the...
That's not what she said.
That's not what I'm
Because we don't have a tax base. I don't want to parse her words.
That's not what she said.
We don't have the commercial tax base that other school districts do have.
To allow for this tax rebate to occur to those citizens that are most suffering and give them their 30% rebate.
Those are your words, those are not.
That is my words. That's what I'm saying. So
Thank you.
do we have enough tax base to give these suffering people this 30% rebate?
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes, the rebate, Mr. Bradley, is for senior citizens, those who have a disability, and who are widowed. Jay gets the rebate, he has to do it yearly. It is done with $35,000 and below, and you have to request it from the state yearly, and you also have to then add that to your income for income tax yearly.
So you're saying he gets it already?
Rebate. Yes, he does.
And who's this guy? Who are you?
Jay.
I never met you. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's fine.
Who?
But we used to bring it up at board meetings.
So-
Please make sure if you're a homeowner or a farmstead owner, please fill out the Exclusion Act. Also, there's something called a tax rebate. It's a big green form. I don't have it with me tonight, but it's an actual booklet. And people have to fill it out. But those are the requirements for a personal homeowner.
But so then you're saying we do have this program already?
We don't have this program, we have the Homestead Exclusion Act.
Right.
But this program is similar to
That's
that.
above and beyond.
Right, and you can get, if somebody who, under those requirements, which I just mentioned, they could go pick up a tax rebate booklet at the Will Hepley's office and complete it, and ask the state for that 30% rebate. We get to $35,000 and lower, and hopefully you get it. It took you what, Jay, a year?
2 years.
2 years.
I would like this district to do the math on what this rebate would cost us to help those most dangerous people.
Individual.
Because I believe it'll be negligible in comparison to the amount of advantage they will get to stay in this community. Because like you said, the homestead of, those people are paying taxes and do not burden this district. So I'd like to keep them in our community and protect them from an overbearing tax base.
Again, thank you everyone for coming this evening. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh.